What happens when your wealthy neighbor builds his dream pool 3 feet onto your property and laughs when you ask him to move it? When 52-year-old electrical engineer Marcus discovered what his neighbor had unknowingly built over, his response turned a simple property dispute into a $500,000 nightmare that changed everything. My name is Marcus Chen, and I'm about to tell you how my neighbor's arrogance and my professional expertise combined to create the most expensive lesson about property lines in our neighborhood's history. It started on a Tuesday morning when I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery. I'd been expecting it. My neighbor, Brad Whitman, had been talking about his pool project for months. Brad was a successful real estate developer who moved into the neighborhood 2 years ago, buying the biggest house on the block and immediately starting renovations. I'm an electrical engineer for the city's utilities department. Been doing it for 28 years. My job involves inspecting power lines, checking safety compliance, and ensuring that construction projects don't interfere with critical infrastructure. It's detailed work that most people find boring, but it pays well, and I understand systems that keep cities running. My house is modest compared to Brad's mansion, a 3-bedroom ranch I bought 15 years ago after my divorce. Nothing fancy, but it's mine, paid off, with a small yard that backs up to the utility easement that runs behind all the houses on our street. That Tuesday, I watched through my kitchen window as excavators dug the hole for Brad's pool. The project was impressive, a kidney-shaped infinity pool with a waterfall feature and extensive stonework. Probably cost more than most people make in 5 years. By Friday, the concrete forms were in place. By Friday, they were laying tile. Professional work, moving fast, clearly expensive. I was actually happy for Brad. He'd worked hard for his success, and if he wanted to spend his money on a luxury pool, that was his business. Until I noticed where they'd built it. Saturday morning, I was mowing my lawn when something caught my eye. The pool's eastern edge seemed awfully close to my property line. I grabbed my old survey stakes from the garage, wooden markers I'd placed when I first bought the house to mark the exact boundaries. What I found made my stomach drop. The pool extended 3 feet onto my property. I measured twice to be sure. Then I got my original survey documents from inside and measured again. No question about it. Brad's beautiful new pool was partially built on my land. I walked over to his house and found him admiring his finished project with what looked like a cocktail in his hand. "Brad, we need to talk about your pool." He turned with a big smile. "Beautiful, isn't it? Cost me $400,000, but worth every penny. It's built on my property." His smile faded. "What are you talking about?" I explained what I'd measured, showed him where my property line actually ran. Brad listened with growing annoyance. "Look, Marcus," he said when I finished, "even if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, we're talking about 3 feet. 3 feet of grass that you weren't using for anything anyway. It's still my property." He laughed, the kind of dismissive sound rich people make when they think you're being unreasonable. "Come on, man, be practical. The pool's already built. You want me to tear it down over 3 feet? I want you to respect property lines." His expression hardened. "Let me explain something to you. I've got the best construction attorneys in the state. I've got money, connections, and experience dealing with small-time complaints. If you want to make this a legal issue, I promise you'll lose more than you gain." I kept my voice level. "I'm not trying to start a legal issue. I'm just telling you the pool is on my property." "And I'm telling you that's not my problem anymore." Brad took a sip of his drink. "The pool stays where it is. If you don't like it, call your lawyer." That night, I sat on my back deck looking at Brad's pool lights reflecting off the water. The whole setup was beautiful, no question. But principle mattered more than appearance. And what bothered me wasn't just the 3 feet of property, it was his assumption that money and threats could solve any problem. I pulled out my work laptop and did something I probably should have done earlier. I accessed the city's utility database to check the exact location of underground infrastructure near our properties. What I found made me sit up straight in my chair. The main electrical transmission line that fed power to our entire neighborhood ran directly underneath Brad's pool. Not near it, under it. The pool had been built directly over a high-voltage electrical line that carried 35,000 volts of electricity. But that wasn't the worst part. The database also showed a major natural gas pipeline running parallel to the electrical line, both buried 6 feet down in what was supposed to be a protected utility corridor. Brad hadn't just built his pool on my property. He'd built it over critical infrastructure that was protected by federal safety regulations. I spent the next hour reading through code violations and safety requirements. Building permanent structures over high-voltage electrical lines was prohibited by state law. Construction over natural gas pipelines required special permits and safety inspections that clearly hadn't been obtained. The liability issues alone were staggering. If anything happened to those lines, earthquake damage, excavation accidents, even routine maintenance, Brad's pool would have to be completely removed to allow access. But the real problem was what I found in the federal database. Both utility lines were part of the regional power grid and interstate gas distribution system. That made them subject to federal infrastructure protection laws with violations that could result in criminal charges. Wednesday morning, I called Brad. "We need to talk," I said. "About what?" "About what you built your pool over. Marcus, if this is still about property lines, it's about utility lines. Your pool is sitting on top of major electrical and gas infrastructure." Silence. Then, "What are you talking about?" "Check your permits. Check what utilities you're supposed to have avoided." I heard papers rustling. "My contractor handled all that." "Your contractor missed something important." More silence. "How important?" "Federal violation important." That afternoon, Brad showed up at my door with a different attitude. Gone was the confident swagger, replaced by something closer to panic. "Marcus, I need you to explain exactly what you found." I showed him the utility maps, the federal safety regulations, the state building codes his pool violated. With each document, Brad's face got paler. "This can't be right," he said. "I paid for professional surveys, proper permits, everything." "Did you get utility clearance?" My contractor said he handled it." "What's your contractor's name?" Brad gave me the information. I looked up the company online. Small operation, not licensed for major utility work, several code violations in their history. "Brad, you've got a serious problem." "How serious?" I thought about his attitude from the weekend, his threats, his assumption that money could solve everything. "Serious enough that I'm required to report it." His eyes widened. "Required?" "I work for the city utilities department. I've now identified a major safety violation in my professional capacity. I can't just ignore it." Wait, let's talk about this. What if I paid to move the property line? Made this whole thing legal? You can't move utility lines, Brad. What if I compensated you properly, whatever you think is fair? I looked at him standing in my doorway, finally understanding that his money and lawyers couldn't fix this problem. "I'm calling it in tomorrow morning." The utility inspectors arrived Friday morning. 3 trucks, city electrical, county gas authority, and federal infrastructure safety. I watched from my kitchen window as they surrounded Brad's pool with equipment. By noon, they'd confirmed everything I'd reported. The pool sat directly over 2 major utility lines, built without proper clearances or safety inspections. Worse, the excavation had damaged the protective casing around the gas pipeline. The shutdown order came that afternoon. Brad's power was cut off immediately as a safety precaution. The gas line was isolated and depressurized. Yellow safety tape surrounded his entire backyard. Brad appeared at my door that evening, looking like he'd aged 5 years in one day. "They're saying I have to tear it down," he said. "The whole pool, the stonework, everything." "What did you expect? They're talking about criminal charges, federal violations. How was I supposed to know about utility lines?" "You were supposed to check before you built." His voice cracked. "This is going to cost me everything. The removal, the restoration, the fines. My insurance won't cover it because I didn't have proper permits." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "You should have thought about that before you built on my property and then threatened me with lawyers." "Marcus, please, isn't there something we can work out?" "Work out with who? The Federal Infrastructure Authority? The county gas inspector? This isn't about us anymore, Brad." The demolition took 3 weeks. I watched from my deck as crews dismantled Brad's $400,000 pool piece by piece. Every tile, every stone, every inch of concrete had to be removed to allow access to the damaged utility lines. The final bill was over $600,000. Pool removal, utility line repairs, federal fines, and restoration of the protected corridor. Brad's insurance covered nothing because of the permit violations. He sold the house 2 months later, at a loss. The new owners were a young family who introduced themselves politely and asked about property lines before planting so much as a flower garden. I kept the survey stakes visible after that, painted bright orange so no one could miss them. Sometimes I'd sit on my deck in the evening, looking at the restored grass where Brad's pool used to be, remembering his laugh when he thought 3 feet of property didn't matter. Turns out, those 3 feet mattered more than he ever imagined. Not because of the land itself, but because of what lay beneath it. Infrastructure that kept the neighborhood running, protected by laws that even expensive lawyers couldn't bend. Sometimes the most expensive mistakes start with the smallest violations. Sometimes the person who knows the most about utilities isn't the one you want to threaten. And sometimes the cost of ignoring property lines isn't measured in feet, but in federal violations that no amount of money can fix.
Have you ever had a neighbor who thought their wealth put them above basic rules? What would you do if someone built on your property and then threatened you for complaining? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Hidden Hearth for more stories about property disputes, neighbor conflicts, and the moment when arrogance meets expertise.